At Hillsborough, the clock is ticking once again. Sheffield Wednesday are already living through one of the darkest periods in the club's history, a chapter defined by administration, relegation, and now the looming reality of beginning the 2026-27 League One season with a 5-point deduction. Since entering administration in 2024, the club has been trapped in a prolonged financial crisis that has forced administrators Begbie's trainer into a race against time to secure new ownership. That urgency intensified when James' board withdrew from negotiations at the end of February. His consortium had previously been granted exclusivity for 2 months and had initially offered £47.8 million. However, the deal collapsed when the group concluded that the club's true valuation was significantly lower, and attempts to renegotiate the price ultimately failed. Board's team had already spent £4 million helping to fund the club's operations during that period, but it was not enough to prevent relegation, which was confirmed last month. Once the deal fell apart, the administrators reopened the process and multiple bids quickly emerged. Former Newcastle owner Mike Ashley entered the race, alongside a consortium led by former Sunderland executive Charlie Methven and 2 American investment groups. With the club's financial survival hanging in the balance, the administrators faced a critical decision about which offer could realistically stabilise Sheffield Wednesday. In the end, Begbie's trainer accepted a bid worth around £20 million. It was not the highest theoretical valuation discussed earlier in the process, but it cleared the key threshold required to move the sale forward. The minimum acceptable figure had been set at roughly £16 million, meaning the offer comfortably exceeded that baseline. However, it still fell well short of the amount required to ensure that unsecured creditors received at least 25% of what they are owed. As a result, the 5-point penalty will remain in place when Wednesday begin their League One campaign. The reasoning behind accepting this figure reveals the deeper strategic calculation shaping the deal. Paying the full amount required to satisfy creditors would have meant directing a significant portion of the funds towards debt repayment. The largest beneficiary would have been former owner Dafon Chansiri, who is owed £15.5 million as the club's biggest creditor. Instead, the administrators and the preferred bidders appear to have aligned around a different approach. Rather than diverting capital towards clearing historic liabilities, the incoming ownership group intends to invest that money directly into the club's operations. The logic is clear. Sheffield Wednesday are heading into what promises to be an extremely challenging season, beginning at the bottom of the table with a points deficit. Preserving resources to rebuild the squad, stabilise finances and restore operational capacity may offer a more realistic path to recovery than fully settling old debts. The preferred bidder now positioned to take control is American businessman David Storch. In public comments following the announcement that his consortium had moved into pole position, Storch struck an optimistic tone. He spoke about restoring pride to one of English football's historic clubs and reconnecting with supporters at Hillsborough. Yet, just as the takeover appeared to be gathering momentum, a new obstacle has emerged from the regulatory side of English football. Before the deal can be finalised, Storch must pass the owners and directors test administered by the English Football League, a process now being closely monitored by the newly established independent football regulator. According to reporting from The Athletic, regulators are expected to raise questions about a previous legal settlement involving AAR Corp, a company linked to Storch. In 2024, AAR agreed to pay a $55 million settlement to resolve investigations by the United States Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The investigations related to violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act after an executive at one of AAR's subsidiaries and an external agent both pleaded guilty to bribing government officials in Nepal and South Africa. Although the settlement did not directly accuse Storch personally of wrongdoing, the scale and nature of the case mean regulators are likely to examine the matter closely during the approval process. That scrutiny now places the final stage of the takeover firmly in the hands of regulators. Storch himself appears confident that the settlement involving AAR Corp will not ultimately block the acquisition. From his perspective, the issue has already been resolved through the legal process in the United States, and he believes it should not prevent his consortium from becoming the new custodians of Sheffield Wednesday. However, confidence from a prospective owner does not guarantee approval. The EFL's decision will unfold under intense scrutiny, particularly now that the independent football regulator is overseeing the integrity of the ownership approval process. After years of financial instability across English football, regulators are under growing pressure to demonstrate that every new owner meets strict standards of transparency and governance. For Sheffield Wednesday supporters, that reality creates an uneasy waiting period. On one hand, the club appears closer than it has been in years to securing new investment and a clear long-term direction after 2 turbulent seasons in administration. On the other hand, the sale is not yet finalised. If regulators raise serious concerns or request further clarification, the process could slow significantly. The central question now is whether this will prove to be nothing more than a procedural hurdle, or whether another complication could derail a takeover that many supporters hope will finally bring stability back to Hillsborough.